Okay, so the next section we're going to talk about is cultural expectations and socialization. It starts on page 58, and most of this that you see typed out here will be in the book, so I would highlight it. Socialization is the process of molding a child's behavior and beliefs to be appropriate for his or her cultural group. A lot of times we see what is appropriate behavior for males, what's appropriate behavior for females, those kinds of things. Children typically learn their earliest lessons about their culture standards and expectations for behavior from parents and other family members who teach them simple manners, encourage them to do well in school, and so on. And when those behaviors don't occur, thus we get an out-of-control child. That socialization has not been formed. That mold has not been made. Once children reach school age, teachers become equally important socialization agents, and I think we've talked about that before. You have students 7.5 hours out of 5 days a week, 7.5 hours a day, 5 days a week. You are a socialization agent. You can help change and mold, at least, if nothing else, expectations within your own classroom. In Western society, teachers typically expect and encourage such behaviors as showing respect for authority figures, following rules and directions, controlling impulses, working independently, and asking for help when it's needed. These are just some standard things that we expect to happen. Now, just because you're requiring it in your classroom, does that mean the student's going to obey it at home? I can tell you the answer is no. But my students, as I said earlier, my students answered me yes ma'am, no ma'am, even though they did not talk to their parents that way. It is what your expectations are. What do you expect? And how do you expect the students to act out in public? When behaviors expected at school differ from those expected at home, or when belief systems presented by teachers are inconsistent with those of children's parents, children may initially experience some culture shock. I find that my first 6 weeks, I tell my parents, give me 6 weeks. Actually, research says 21 days to make or break a habit. So actually, 21 days in, you should be able to see a difference in the students. But I tell my parents, give me 6 weeks. If you will work with me and support me, you will not recognize your child after 6 weeks. And that happens, guys. That expectation's high enough and the students actually come to that. Now, I still got some parents' resistance, and that does make it more difficult. And there's times I've had to remind the parents, I am in charge. This is my classroom. I don't go home with you and tell you how to parent, for the most part. And I don't expect you to come in my classroom and tell me how to run my classroom. So it's kind of an understanding of I respect what you do, you respect what I do. Some children with less adaptable or more irritable temperaments may even become angry or resistant, and you're going to find that at the beginning. But keep in mind, Brain Rules, the book Brain Rules says 21 days to make or break a habit. Now, that's 21 consecutive days. If you miss a day of that training and that molding, then the process actually starts all over again, research says. As teachers, we must certainly encourage behaviors essential for students' long-term success, such as obeying rules, following directions and instructions, and working independently. At the same time, students will need our guidance, support, and patience when our expectations differ from those of their family or culture group. For the very first 2 weeks of school, no one pulls a card, no one gets in trouble. Are they called down for being in trouble? Yes. And I remind them, if this was such and such day, you would be pulling a card. If this was such and such day, you would be staying in at recess. I really tried to give them a couple of weeks to try to get them in that consistency and that flow that I expect my classroom to have. When you're showing that initial mercy, then as you start actually pinning them down with the rules and enforcing them, then they realize, oh my gosh, she's been easy on me. And I use that with parents as well. I might also say right here, if I were you as a teacher, I would try to get my grade level to develop some kind of a handbook. We had a 5th grade handbook that all of the teachers that I worked with abided by. We sent copies of it home, what we expected as far as homework, what we expected as far as behavior, field trips, and those kinds of things. The back sheet was a sheet that said, I have read and understand the rules, and the parent was to sign it and the child was to sign it. Now, I had some parents come up and say, I don't agree with this. Well, that wasn't what that last page said. It said, I have read and understood. I'm not asking them if they agree with it or not. We had agreed as a grade level, we wanted a handbook. This is what we expected out of the students, and we weren't looking for agreement or disagreement. We're looking, did you read it and do you understand it? Then later on as the semester went on, if a student, especially there at the beginning, if a student broke one of the rules, I always highlighted the rule that was broken in the handbook and then put a copy of the signed sheet where they said they understood and had read it and attached it and sent it home and made the parents sign it. I wanted them to know I was holding them accountable. And that consistency throughout the class, it didn't matter who it was, everybody was treated the same. There's a socialization video right there. Give me some feedback. What do you think? How are you going to handle this socialization? What kind of socialization agent are you going to be in your classroom?